We are pleased to welcome back to our studios, it's been a while, is Republican candidate for the District 2 Congressional seat. Grant Bosse joins us in studio. Good morning, Grant.
Good morning, Charlie. Good to be home.
It's good to have you back with us, an old radio guy yourself.
I never thought I would fill up at $3.74 a gallon and feel like it's a bargain because it's come down 25 cents. And when it comes to gas prices, we have choices. We can actually have a serious attempt to lower the price of oil by getting government out of the way, by drilling domestically, by building new refineries, or we can talk about carpooling and, pretend that we're going to have solar-powered cars in the next 5 years. It's not going to happen. If we're not willing to at least start with our domestic resources, then we're not serious about bringing down the price of gasoline and lowering congressional interference in the energy marketplace. So let's drill in Alaska, let's drill off our coast, let's use new forms of oil and gas like oil sands out in Utah. We've got billions of barrels. And when when oil was $40 a barrel, it didn't make sense to invest in these new technologies. Well, it hasn't been $40 a barrel for quite some time. It does make sense to invest in these new technologies. And it makes sense to look into solar and wind and geothermal and biomass and all the alternatives. But right now our tax code is stacked so that Congress picks the winners and the losers. They pick ethanol policy, for example. And then it makes it harder to get the closed loop biomass that we've got here in New Hampshire.
How do you change that, though? Because Congress has a mentality of working together. They have that group mentality. How do you get in there and as one person make any difference?
Well, I wouldn't be the first vote for fiscal discipline. I wouldn't be the first critic of our failed energy policy. John Sununu and Judd Gregg have been voting against that. They've been pushing in the Senate to have an actual up or down vote on drilling in American waters. And Harry Reid in the Senate is shutting down the Senate rather than allow a vote. Nancy Pelosi and Paul Hodes won't even allow a vote to drill offshore. And there's a number of Democrats that want to do this, and they're being prevented by their own party leadership, by people like Nancy Pelosi and Jack Murtha and Paul Hodes supporting them. They're being prevented from even voting to... I'm very disappointed. I'm disappointed the president signed that bill. I think it's a bad move. I don't think we should be bailing out people who bought too much house, and we certainly shouldn't be bailing out banks who made bad loans. We're fueling the next housing bubble today. We're guaranteeing that 5 or 10 years from now, we're going to have another boom in housing prices, and people are going to think that housing prices never go down. And then when housing prices go down, they're going to come back to the federal government for another bailout. It's the wrong thing to do. Capitalism is as much about failure as it is about success. And if we punish success and shield people from the price of failure, you get bad decisions. You get irresponsible loans. You get people paying zero down and zero on their principal. They're making a monthly payment, but they're not actually buying any equity in their house.
It's like paying rent.
There is a technical term called rent.
Yeah.
But when you stop paying your rent, the federal government doesn't buy the apartment for you. Until now, when we've got this housing bill, I'm very disappointed. Plus, of course, with any big bill like this, with any $300 billion package, there's some really obnoxious stuff hidden in there. We are now going to start paying local governments to take your house. Through the Community Development Block Grant, we are funding local governments to buy foreclosed homes from the banks. So since the banks now know that there's a pot of money to sell this house, they're going to be more willing to foreclose on your house and less willing to make a deal to keep you in your house.
So is this going to cause more foreclosures rather than less?
Well, anytime you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. So I think now we're going to see more foreclosures. Banks are going to be more willing to sell your house to the town for community development than they are to work with you to restructure your mortgage and keep you in your home. So rather than, it's going to be fewer foreclosures of people who bought too much house and had a bad loan to begin with. It's going to be more foreclosures of people that are trying to do the right thing, but can't work out a deal to restructure their mortgage.
But don't you think Angela has a good point? She's made her mortgage payments as agreed upon and read her paperwork when she got her mortgage. And let's say for the sake of argument, she has a 6% mortgage. And now the guy down the street who hasn't been paying his mortgage, who is on the threshold of having his house foreclosed upon, now has somebody say to him, hey Joe, you know what, we're rewarding you for for almost getting foreclosed, we're gonna give you a 3% mortgage because you don't make your payments.
Yeah.
While Angela sits down the street and says, wait a second,
I
am
don't
I
go
that
to
much of
dinner,
a jerk? I pay my bills, I've cut out things with my family so I can make that payment at 6% and be on time every month, and Joe Bag of Donuts down the street is getting a 3% mortgage, I might as well not make my payment.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's
Oh,
the incentives
man.
that now the next time around, 5 years, 10 years from now, we're going to see what happened. We saw what happened with the savings and loan bailout back in '89. People are going to go, you know what? I probably can't afford this house, but I'll do it anyway. And if I can't make the payments, somebody else will bail me out and we'll restructure the mortgage. I mean, once you start messing with the sanctity of a contract, everything's up in the air. If you can't count on a contract being enforced, then it's the Wild West out there.
Boy, oh boy, something wrong somewhere. All right, we've got to take a quick break. Grant Bosse.
I'm hearing a lot about veterans. In fact, when I released my my comprehensive health care plan back in June, 3 of the 10 points dealt specifically with veterans health care. And we're hearing a lot about that. Obviously, the VA Center here in Manchester, the ridiculous comments from our VA secretary, who said that veterans weren't going to be very good consumers of health care, were insulting, and I don't know why he thinks he should be running the Veterans Administration. We limit.
I'm not going to argue. I was there when he said it. And
Yeah.
I was like, what?
We segregate our veterans into a second-class healthcare system. And not because the VA is bad or the people working there aren't trying, but a government bureaucracy can't possibly compete with private and public hospitals in offering the broad range of healthcare options that are available in the United States. We've got the best healthcare in the U.S., we've got health insurance problems, but we've got more healthcare options out there, and we keep our veterans from doing it. So rather than keeping them trapped in that system, I want to give them the opportunity to go to private hospitals, to find the doctor of their choice, rather than sitting in traffic, driving down to Boston. Now, Paul Hode's approach is to increase the stipend you get for sitting in traffic driving down to Boston. I want to keep them off the road in the first place and let them go to whatever doctor they choose. I want them to be able to use association health plans, which millions of Americans have used since they were introduced in 2003. If you receive services at a VA hospital within the last 6 months, you cannot use an association health plan. I think that's nuts.
If you did that approach and you allowed them to use the private sector, wouldn't that drive down costs as well because you'd start the competition process?
Yeah, competition always helps the consumer and it always brings down cost. More than that, we could use our VA system, and I think this is the real important thing. We could then concentrate the VA system on service-related care. So that, and that's more than just bullets and shrapnel. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. New Hampshire just started a new study, a new commission to study the effects of PTSD and other conditions on vets returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. I was at that bill signing. I want to give credit. Bob Clegg, one of my opponents, was one of the sponsors of the bill. I think that's a good idea. That's an area where we agree. So let's get the VA, make that the best in the world at service-related care. And the more we find out in the VA medical system, the more we can then apply out in the field in Iraq and Afghanistan and around the world. So we can see how people are affected by roadside bombs, what the threat is, and how can we change our tactics and our equipment in the field to prevent those kind of injuries in the future. So concentrating the VA system isn't just going to mean better health care for veterans, it's going to save lives on the battlefield.
Let me ask a question because this really bothers me. Because I think